At 7:14 on a rainy Thursday morning in Chicago, Mara Bennett stood barefoot in the kitchen of the Lincoln Park townhouse she had begun calling home without realizing how dangerous that word could become, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, the other resting unconsciously against the thin gold ring on her left hand, while Julian Mercer stood by the window reading emails on his phone as though the world outside belonged to him, which, in certain ways, it did. "You're leaving Friday?" Mara asked. "Saturday morning," Julian answered without looking up. "You said Friday last night." He lowered the phone and gave her the familiar half-smile that had once made every doubt feel childish. "I said I might leave Friday, sweetheart." The meeting moved. Las Vegas again. "It's work," he said, and then, because he knew exactly which word would soften her, he added, "You know that." Mara looked at him across the marble island, at the navy shirt she had ironed the night before, at the silver watch his father had given him when Julian closed his first major development deal, at the tiny scar beside his right eyebrow that she had kissed hundreds of times, and wondered why a sentence she had heard so often suddenly sounded rehearsed. "How long?" she asked. "2 nights, maybe 3. And Sophie will be there?" The silence was brief, less than a second, but Mara noticed it, Julian noticed that she noticed it, and somewhere between them something small and invisible changed shape. "Sophie works with the hotel group," he said. "You know that." "I know she used to." "She still consults for them, right?" Mara said, and smiled because she had learned that sometimes a smile was the quickest way to end a conversation before it became an accusation. Julian crossed the kitchen and kissed her forehead. "Don't start this again," he murmured, not angrily, almost tenderly. Which somehow made it worse. "I'm not starting anything," she said, "I'm asking. And I'm answering." He touched the ring on her finger, the diamond catching the gray morning light. "October 24th, he said softly. "That's all I care about." Mara looked down at the ring, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe him, because belief was easier than suspicion, because they had been together for almost 6 years. Because 3 months earlier he had proposed at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Chicago River while their friends applauded and someone at the next table filmed the moment for Instagram, because his mother had cried, because Mara's sister had called her the luckiest woman alive, because the wedding invitations were already being addressed, because a woman did not dismantle a life over a pause that lasted less than a second. "I have a fitting at 2, she said. "Don't forget," Julian smiled. "I won't." He picked up his coat and left 10 minutes later, and Mara remained in the kitchen listening to the rain tap against the windows, telling herself that the uneasy feeling in her chest was wedding anxiety, nothing more. But at 11:32 that morning, while searching through a shared folder for the final guest list, she found a document Julian had forgotten to rename, a hotel confirmation from the Belrose Las Vegas, dated exactly 5 years earlier. The reservation was for 2 guests, 1 room, 3 nights, and the second guest was listed as Sophie Caldwell. Mara stared at the screen until the letters blurred, then opened another file, and another. There were 12 confirmations, then 19. Then dates stretching across 5 years, always Las Vegas, always Julian, always Sophie. Sometimes the rooms were different, sometimes the hotel changed, but the pattern remained so consistent that it stopped looking like coincidence and began looking like a life she had never been invited into. "No," she whispered, because the first instinct of a betrayed person is often not anger but refusal, the mind reaching desperately for an explanation that will preserve the architecture of what it knows. She checked the dates again. One of them fell on the weekend Julian had told her he was in Phoenix for a construction emergency. Another was the anniversary of their 3rd year together, when he had sent Mara flowers at her office and said he was sorry he could not take her to dinner because he was exhausted. She remembered how proud she had felt when the bouquet arrived, how her coworkers had teased her, how she had posted a photograph of the roses with the caption, "He still knows how to surprise me." Mara closed her eyes, and the memory turned cruel. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Julian. "Love you. Don't stress about anything today. Wedding is going to be perfect." She read it twice, then a 3rd time, and for the first time the word perfect sounded like a threat, not a promise. That evening, Julian came home carrying a bottle of wine and a paper bag from the Italian restaurant they both loved. He kissed her cheek, asked about her fitting, complained about traffic on the Kennedy Expressway, and spoke for 15 minutes about a development project in Fulton Market, while Mara watched him with the terrible concentration of someone studying a stranger. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine." "You sure?" "Yes." He opened the wine, poured 2 glasses, and lifted his toward her. "To us." Mara raised her glass but did not drink. "Julian," she said, "can I ask you something?" He froze for half a heartbeat. "Of course. Have you been taking Sophie to Las Vegas?" The bottle remained in his hand, suspended above the table, and in that moment Mara saw the exact instant he understood that the secret had stopped belonging to him. "What?" he said. "Sophie," she repeated, quieter this time. "Have you been taking her to Las Vegas?" Julian set the bottle down carefully, almost gently. "Where did you hear that?" Mara felt something inside her go cold, because he had not said no, he had not laughed, he had not looked offended, he had asked where she had heard it. "That's your answer," she whispered. Julian pulled out the chair opposite her and sat down. "Mara, you don't understand what this is." She stared at him. "Then help me understand." He rubbed both hands over his face, and for the first time that evening he looked frightened, not guilty, but frightened, as though the danger was not what he had done, but what she might do now that she knew. "Sophie and I have history," he said. "History." Mara's voice broke on the word. 5 years of hotel reservations is history? Julian looked away. "It wasn't what you think." "Then what was it?" He said nothing, and outside, the rain continued falling over Chicago, washing the streets clean while leaving the inside of their beautiful house untouched. "Tell me the truth," Mara said, "just once." Julian finally looked at her. And she saw it in his eyes before he spoke, the terrible calculation of a man deciding which truth would cost him the least. "I never meant for you to find out like this." Mara slowly removed her engagement ring and placed it on the table between them, not because she had made a decision yet, but because she suddenly needed to see what her life looked like without the symbol that had made all her doubts feel impossible. Julian stared at the ring, then at her, and whispered, "Mara, please." She looked at him for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was almost calm. "I haven't asked you to beg yet." Julian did not touch the engagement ring. It remained on the dining table between them, a small circle of gold and diamond that suddenly seemed less like a promise than evidence. "Mara," he said again. She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, watching him search for words that would make the truth smaller. "Start at the beginning." Julian swallowed. "It started before you and I were serious." "That isn't the beginning." He looked at her. "The beginning is when you decided I didn't deserve to know." His jaw tightened. "You're making this sound worse than it was." Mara almost laughed. "Then tell me what it was." Julian leaned back in his chair and stared at the dark window behind her. Rain streaked the glass, turning the city lights into long, trembling lines. "Sophie and I were together for almost 3 years, he said. "I know." "No. You know we dated." "You don't know what happened." "Then tell me." "We broke up badly. She wanted marriage. I wasn't ready. My father was sick, the company was struggling, and I thought I had to choose between my family and my relationship." "And you chose your family?" "Yes." Mara waited. "But then why did you keep taking her to Vegas?" His eyes dropped. "She moved there. So sometimes I needed to see her. Sometimes." Julian exhaled slowly. "Vegas became a place where we could talk." Mara stared at him. "Talk?" "Yes. For 5 years. It wasn't every month." She turned toward the laptop still sitting open on the counter. "Would you like me to count?" Julian said nothing. Mara picked up the computer and turned it toward him. January 14. March 22. July 9. October 3. Then December. Then the following year. "You went 27 times in the first 2 years." His face changed. "You went through all of them. I thought I was looking for a mistake. And I found a pattern." Julian rubbed his forehead. "You don't understand." "I understand dates. They weren't all romantic." Mara stared at him. "Were any of them?" Silence. That was enough. She closed the laptop. "Did you sleep with her?" Julian's eyes closed. "Mara. Did you?" "Yes." The word landed quietly. No explosion. No shattered glass. Just one syllable, and suddenly the room felt much larger than it had a minute earlier. How many times? I don't know. 5 years. I said I don't know. Then give me a number you do know. Julian looked at her. More than once. She nodded slowly. That is not an answer. I can't give you one. Because there were too many. Because I never counted. Mara looked toward the staircase. Their wedding photographs were stacked in a box upstairs. Samples of flowers sat on the bedroom dresser. A seating chart was taped to the wall in Julian's office. Her mother had already booked a flight from Boston. His parents had reserved a private room for the rehearsal dinner. An entire future had been constructed around a man who could not tell her how many times he had betrayed her. When did it stop? She asked. Julian hesitated. It didn't. Mara looked back at him. What? It didn't completely stop. She stood. For the first time, Julian looked genuinely afraid. Mara, you're still seeing her? No. When did it stop? About 8 months ago. She stared at him. 8 months. That was after he had proposed. The realization moved through her slowly, like cold water. You proposed to me while you were still involved with her. It was complicated. No. Mara shook her head. Don't call it complicated. It was. No. Complicated is loving two people and not knowing what to do. What you did was simple. Julian stood. You don't know what it felt like. Then tell me. I loved you. You loved her too. I cared about her. That's convenient. I was trying to end it. For 5 years. I was afraid. Of what? He looked down. Of hurting everyone. Mara's expression hardened. You mean yourself. Julian said nothing. You were afraid of losing Sophie, so you kept Sophie. You were afraid of losing me, so you kept me. You were afraid of disappointing your parents, so you kept planning a wedding. That isn't fair. What part? You make it sound calculated. It was calculated. No. Julian stepped closer. I never woke up thinking, I'm going to destroy Mara today. But you woke up and went to Las Vegas. He stopped. Mara's voice softened. That is worse. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Julian whispered, Sophie understood me. Mara felt something inside her crack. What does that mean? She knew me before all this. All what? The company. My father's expectations. The money. The person everyone wanted me to become. And I didn't. You loved who I became. I loved you. I know. No, you don't. Her eyes filled, but she refused to cry. You think Sophie knew some secret version of you that I could never understand. But you never gave me the chance. You gave her your honesty and gave me your performance. That isn't true. You told her the truth. I told her things. You told her enough to make her stay. Julian looked away. And you told me enough to make me marry you. His face tightened. I never wanted to hurt you. That's the sentence people use when they want forgiveness without accountability. Mara. She walked toward the kitchen. Julian followed. What are you doing? Getting some air. You can't leave like this. She turned. Why not? Because we need to talk. We've been talking. No, we haven't. Yes, we have. You've spent the last hour explaining why your betrayal wasn't really betrayal. That isn't what I'm doing. It is. She picked up her coat. Julian's voice changed. Where are you going? I don't know. You can't just disappear. Mara stopped with her hand on the doorknob. The irony was almost unbearable. Watch me. She opened the door. Mara. She turned once. Was there ever a year when you didn't take her? Julian didn't answer. That was answer enough. She walked into the rain. By midnight, Mara was sitting alone in the back seat of a rideshare, watching Chicago disappear behind wet glass. She had not told her sister. She had not called her mother. She had not posted anything online. She had not cried. Not yet. Her phone kept vibrating. Julian, please come home. Another message. Julian, we can fix this. Another. Julian, I love you. Mara stared at the last message. Then she typed. Which one of us are you saying that to? She deleted it. Instead, she opened the hotel confirmations again. There were more than 27. There were 43. She scrolled farther. 48. 52. Then she found something she had not noticed before. A reservation from 3 years ago. The guest name was not Julian Mercer. It was James Mercer, his father's name. Mara's thumb stopped moving. She opened the file. The reservation was for the same hotel where Julian had taken Sophie. 2 nights. 2 guests. The second name was Sophie Caldwell. Mara stared at the screen. For the first time that night, the betrayal seemed larger than Julian. It had a history. It had witnesses. Maybe even permission. Her phone rang. Julienne. She let it ring. Then another call. His mother. Then her sister. Then Julian again. Mara turned the phone face down. Outside, Chicago passed in silence. She finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she had lost her fiancé. Because she suddenly understood that the man she had loved had been telling her the truth in fragments for 5 years, and she had mistaken those fragments for the whole story. At 2:06 a.m. Julian sent one final message. Tomorrow I'll tell you everything. Mara hid it once. Then she whispered to the empty car. No. She looked out at the dark city. Tomorrow, I decide what happens to you. By 9 the next morning, Mara had already learned that betrayal did not make the world stop. The train still screamed along the elevated tracks, delivery trucks still blocked half the streets in Lincoln Park, and somewhere 3 floors below her sister's apartment, a barista was calling out someone's oat milk latte as if nothing in Chicago had changed. Mara had spent the night on Claire's couch. She had not slept. Julian had called 17 times. His mother had called 4. His father had sent 1 text. We should speak privately before this becomes something it doesn't need to be. That sentence had stayed with her. Not "Are you okay?" Not "I'm sorry." Not even "What did Julian do?" Instead, before this becomes something it doesn't need to be. Mara stared at the message while Claire stood in the kitchen making coffee. Don't answer him, Claire said. I wasn't going to. You're staring at it. I know. Claire brought 2 mugs over. Your mother knows. Mara looked up. What? I told her. Claire. She was going to find out. My wedding is in 3 months. Not anymore. Mara looked down at the ring on her finger. She had put it back on that morning without knowing why. Maybe habit. Maybe grief. Maybe because taking it off had made everything too real. Claire sat beside her. You don't owe anyone a wedding because invitations have already gone out. I know. You don't owe Julian a second chance because he says he loves you. I know. And you definitely don't owe his family silence. Mara looked toward the window. I don't know what I owe myself yet. Claire's expression softened. That, she said, is the first honest thing you've said since you got here. Mara's phone buzzed. This time, it was not Julian. It was Sophie. Can we meet? Mara stared at the screen. Claire saw the name. No. I need to. Why? Because I need to know who she is. You know who she is. No, Mara said quietly. I know what Julian told me she was. There was a difference. 2 hours later, Mara sat across from Sophie Caldwell in a quiet restaurant on North Wells Street. Sophie was not what Mara had expected. There was no dramatic beauty, no deliberately seductive dress, no smug expression. She wore a cream sweater, dark trousers, and a thin gold bracelet. She looked tired. That almost made Mara angrier. You wanted to meet, Mara said. Sophie nodded. I did. Why? Because you deserve to hear some things from me. Mara folded her hands. Then start with Vegas. Sophie looked down. Julian told you. Enough. A faint, bitter smile crossed Sophie's face. He always did that. What? Give people enough truth to make the rest sound unreasonable. Mara said nothing. Sophie took a breath. We were together before you. I know. He told you we were finished. Yes. We weren't. Mara felt her stomach tighten. How long? Sophie looked toward the window. Not 5 years continuously. But 5 years. Yes. Why? Sophie hesitated. Because Julian never really left. Mara stared at her. Sophie continued. He left me emotionally. He left me publicly. He told everyone I was his past. But whenever something happened in his life that made him feel trapped, he came back to me. And you let him. Yes. There was no defensiveness in the answer. That honesty unsettled Mara more than excuses would have. Why? Sophie looked directly at her. Because I thought eventually he'd choose. Mara's chest tightened. Choose what? Me. The word hung between them. Mara looked away. Sophie continued. Julian grew up believing love was something you earned by becoming impressive enough. His father didn't say it directly, but everyone understood it. The right school. The right friends. The right woman. The right house. Mara frowned. The right woman. Sophie nodded. His family liked me. I thought his mother liked me. She does. That isn't what I asked. Sophie gave a sad smile. She likes you because Julian chose you. Mara felt the words settle somewhere deep. Why didn't he marry you? Because I didn't fit the future his father wanted. Because my family had money, but not the right kind. Mara stared at her. Sophie looked almost embarrassed. My father made his money in casinos and hospitality. Julian's father thought that was vulgar. He wanted Julian connected to old Chicago money, development, finance, philanthropy, and I fit that. You fit the story. Mara's throat tightened. What story? The respectable one. Silence. Sophie reached into her handbag and pulled out a photograph. She placed it on the table. It was old. Julian was younger, perhaps 28. Sophie stood beside him. Behind them was a hotel ballroom. Several people stood in the background. Mara recognized Julian's parents. And beside them was her own future father-in-law, smiling broadly. This was 6 years ago, Sophie said. Before Julian and I. Yes. Mara looked at the photograph. Why did you show me this? Because your fiancé's father knew Julian and I were together. Mara's eyes lifted. What? He knew. How? Because Julian told him. And he said nothing? Sophie shook her head. He told Julian to end it. Mara's fingers tightened around the photograph. Because of your family. Yes. And after Julian met me, he told his father you were different. Mara almost laughed. Different. Don't take it as an insult. It feels like one. Sophie leaned forward. He didn't mean that you were better than me. Then what did he mean? That you made him look responsible. Mara closed her eyes. The sentence hurt because it sounded exactly like something Julian would say if he were trying to explain himself without admitting what he had done. Why did he take you to Vegas? Sophie looked down at her hands. Because Vegas was the only place where he didn't have to pretend. To whom? To himself. Mara said nothing. Sophie continued. We had a hotel. Dinner. Drinks. We walked. Sometimes we fought for hours. Sometimes we didn't speak. Sometimes we slept together. Mara looked away. Don't give me details. I won't. But you need to understand something. It wasn't a second relationship in the way you probably imagine. Mara's voice hardened. He slept with you. Yes. He lied to me. Yes. He spent our money. Yes. He took you away while telling me he was working. Yes. That sounds exactly like a second relationship. Sophie accepted the accusation. Maybe it was. The waiter came by. Neither woman ordered anything. After he left, Mara asked. Did you love him? Sophie looked at her for a long moment. I did. Do you still? A pause. No. The answer surprised Mara. Why? Because I finally understood something. What? Sophie looked toward the window. Julian doesn't know how to choose. Mara felt something inside her shift. He chooses. No, Sophie said. He selects. What is the difference? Choosing means accepting the loss that comes with the decision. Mara stared at her. Julian doesn't accept loss. He keeps one door open while walking through another. The words followed Mara all the way home. Julian was waiting outside Claire's building. Mara stopped when she saw him. He looked exhausted. His expensive coat was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who had lost control of the story. Please, he said. No. I just need 10 minutes. You've had 5 years. Mara. She kept walking. He followed. I spoke to my father. That isn't my problem. He knows everything. I don't care. He said I made a mistake. Mara stopped. A mistake. Julian swallowed. He knows what happened. Your father knew. Yes. How long? Julian hesitated. Since the beginning. Mara laughed once. It was a small, broken sound. Of course. I didn't tell him everything. You didn't have to. What does that mean? It means everyone around you knew how to protect your reputation. Julian's expression changed. That isn't fair. No? He never approved of Sophie. That doesn't mean he approved of you lying to me. Julian looked away. He thought Sophie was bad for me. And I wasn't. You were good for me. Mara stared at him. There it was. The sentence that finally explained everything. Not I loved you. Not I chose you. You were good for me. You loved me because I was good for you. No. You wanted me because I made sense. That isn't what I meant. It is. Julian stepped closer. I love you. Mara looked into his eyes. Then why did you need her? He had no answer. She waited. Eventually he whispered, because she knew a part of me you didn't. Mara nodded. And you made sure I never could. That wasn't intentional. Maybe not at first. She looked at him. But eventually it was. Julian's eyes filled. I can change. Mara's heart twisted. That was the cruelest part. She believed him. Maybe he could. But she no longer knew whether she wanted to be there when he did. You keep saying we can still have our future, she said. We can. You don't understand. What? The future isn't something you get to keep just because you finally regret the past. Julian reached for her hand. She stepped back. He froze. Mara. You loved me, she said quietly. But you wanted to keep me. His face fell. And those aren't the same thing. She walked inside the building. Julian remained on the sidewalk. He did not follow. For the first time, he understood that the door closing behind Mara was not another argument. It was a boundary. And boundaries were different from threats. They did not require permission to become permanent. For the next 11 days, Mara lived inside the strange silence that came after the truth. She did not move back into the townhouse. She stayed with Claire, worked from her laptop, attended the meetings that could not be cancelled, and answered only the messages that required practical decisions. The wedding planner called on Tuesday. Mara, we need to finalize the seating arrangement. I'm not ready. The invitations have already gone out. I know, and the venue needs the final head count by Friday. Mara closed her eyes. Cancel it. There was silence on the other end. Cancel the wedding? Yes. Have you discussed this with Julian? Mara looked at the rain sliding down Claire's window. No. The wedding planner lowered her voice. I'm very sorry. So am I. After she hung up, Mara sat for several minutes without moving. Then her phone rang. Julian. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. His mother. Then Julian again. Finally, a message appeared. Please come home. We need to talk about the house. Mara stared at those words. The house. Not us. Not the wedding. The house. She called him. He answered immediately. Thank God. What happened? I found a buyer. Mara frowned. For what? The townhouse. She stood. What? I told you I was looking at options. You said you were reviewing refinancing. I was. You didn't say you were selling it. It makes financial sense. Julian, that is our home. It's in my name. The words were quiet. That made them worse. Mara sat down slowly. Say that again. Julian exhaled. You knew the property was purchased before we were engaged. I helped choose the kitchen. I know. I paid for furniture. I'll reimburse you. That isn't the point. I need liquidity. For what? Business. Which business? He hesitated. The Fulton project. Mara laughed bitterly. You're selling our home to cover a business problem. It's not a problem. Then why sell? Because the market is strong. You're lying. Mara. You are. I'm trying to protect our future. She closed her eyes. There it was again. Their future. The phrase he used whenever he wanted to justify something she had never agreed to. You're selling the house without asking me. I don't need your permission. The silence afterward was absolute. Mara whispered, thank you. What? For finally saying it. Julian's voice hardened. Don't twist this. You just told me exactly where I stand. You're emotional. No. She looked around Claire's small apartment. I'm awake. 3 days later, Mara went back to the townhouse to collect her clothes. The front door opened with the same key she had used for nearly 4 years. Inside, everything looked untouched. The cream sofa. The framed photograph from their trip to Napa. The wedding invitations stacked neatly beside the staircase. Even the blue vase she had bought at a street market in Charleston. But a yellow envelope sat on the kitchen island. Mara opened it. A real estate agreement. The townhouse had been sold. Closing date, 6 weeks. She stared at the number. The sale price was enormous. Mara's stomach dropped. She called Julian. He answered after 2 rings. "You're there. You sold it." "Yes. Without telling me." "I told you I was considering it." "No. You told me you were refinancing." "I changed my mind." "You had no right." "I have every legal right." Mara looked at the contract. "And where am I supposed to live?" "Our new place." "Our. I already found a condo." "Did you buy it?" "Not yet." "Whose name?" "Mara." "Whose name?" Silence. She laughed quietly. "You weren't planning to put me on it. That's not the point." "It is exactly the point. You've been staying away. Because you cheated on me. You said you needed space. I needed space from you. Not from my home." Julian's voice dropped. "You're making everything impossible." "No, Julian. I'm finally making everything visible." He hung up. Mara stood alone in the kitchen. For years she had thought the townhouse represented their future. Now she understood what it had represented to Julian. Control. Ownership. Security on his terms. Her phone buzzed. A banking notification. "Your card has been declined." Mara frowned. She tried again. Declined. She opened the banking app. The card that Julian had always called our card had been frozen. She called him. He answered immediately. "You cut off my card." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're not living here. It's a shared account. It's my account. You gave me access. And I can remove it." Mara stared at the screen. "Are you trying to punish me?" "No." "Then what are you trying to do?" "You need to start making your own financial decisions." She was silent. "You're serious." "I am. You know I'm still paying wedding deposits." "I cancelled the wedding." "You cancelled it without speaking to me. Because you lied to me without speaking to me." Julian's voice became colder. "You're proving my point." "What point?" "That you're acting irrationally." Mara laughed. "Irrationally?" "Yes. Julian, you had an affair for 5 years. I told you it wasn't that simple. And now you're selling my home and cutting off my access to money. You don't get to call it your home." She went still. He had crossed something. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But completely. "You're right," she said. "What?" "It was never mine." "Mara." "No. Don't." She hung up. That evening, Julian went to his father's office. Edward Mercer sat behind a walnut desk overlooking downtown Chicago. He listened without interrupting. "You sold the townhouse?" he asked. "Yes." "And froze a hair card?" "Yes." Edward leaned back. "Why?" "To stop her from making emotional decisions." His father studied him. "You think money will make her come back?" "No. You're lying." Julian looked away. Edward sighed. "You've spent your entire life believing control is the same thing as responsibility." Julian's jaw tightened. "She won't listen." "Then perhaps she shouldn't." "What am I supposed to do?" "For once." Edward paused. "Lose." Julian stared at him. "I can't." "You already have." Mara spent the next morning opening every account in her name. Her savings were modest. Her salary was steady. She had investments she had neglected because Julian had always handled their financial planning. She called her bank. "I'm separating my finances," she told the advisor. There was a pause. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Do you need assistance moving your direct deposits?" "Yes." By noon, she had a new account. By 3, she had cancelled every automatic payment tied to Julian. At 5, she returned the engagement ring to its box. Not because she had stopped loving him. That would have been easier. She returned it because love was no longer enough to make her feel safe. That night, Julian appeared outside Claire's building. Mara saw him through the window. He stood beneath the street lamp holding a folder. She went downstairs. "What do you want?" "The sale is done." "I know. I wanted you to have this." He handed her the folder. Inside was a cashier's check. For the furniture and expenses you contributed. Mara looked at it. How generous. His face tightened. I'm trying to make this right. No. Then what am I supposed to do? Stop deciding what is right for me. He stared at her. I love you. Mara looked at him for a long moment. I know. Then come home. She shook her head. I don't have a home with you anymore. You do. No. Her voice trembled. You sold it. Julian's expression broke. Mara. You thought if you took away the house, then the money, then the stability, I would have no choice but to come back. I thought you'd realize what you were throwing away. She handed the check back. You still don't understand. What? You thought I was afraid of losing you. She stepped closer. I was afraid of losing myself. Julian said nothing. Mara walked away. Behind her, he remained beneath the street lamp, holding the check he had intended as proof of control. Now it looked like evidence of desperation. And for the first time, the wedding was no longer merely postponed. It was collapsing. Not because Mara had stopped loving Julian, but because she had finally understood what loving him had been costing her. The last conversation began with a spreadsheet. Not a photograph. Not a love letter. Not a confession. A spreadsheet. Mara sat alone at Claire's dining table on a Sunday morning, the blinds half open, pale winter light falling across rows of dates, hotel names, flight numbers, and expenses. 5 years. 52 trips. Some had been short. Some lasted 4 nights. Some happened during holidays. One had happened on Mara's birthday. Another had happened 3 days before Julian proposed. She had spent the previous week reconstructing everything. Not because she wanted to torture herself. Because she needed to know whether she had misunderstood one thing. She found no misunderstanding. She found architecture. The affair had not been a series of accidents. It had been organized, maintained, protected. Mara closed the laptop. Then she called Julian. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? Can you meet me? A pausa. Yes. Alone. Of course. Somewhere private. I know a place. 2 hours later, they sat across from each other in a quiet private dining room at a hotel near the river. Julian looked thinner. His suit was immaculate, but his face was tired. Mara placed the laptop on the table. He looked at it. What is that? Everything. His expression changed. Mara. 52 trips. Julian said nothing. I verified the flights. She opened the laptop. I checked the hotel records. The credit card statements. Your calendar. Your father's company records. Even the emails you thought you deleted, you went through my accounts. Yes. You had no right. Mara looked at him. You sold my home. Julian flinched. You cut off my money. I was angry. So was I. He looked away. Mara turned the laptop toward him. The 12th of January 2022. She pointed. Belrose, Las Vegas. Then another. April 4. Another. August 18. Another. December 27. Julian's face became increasingly still. You went to Vegas with Sophie on Christmas week. I told you I had a business conference. I know. Mara. You missed my sister's engagement dinner. I remember. You told me you were sick. I was. You were in a hotel suite with her. Julian closed his eyes. Yes. Mara nodded. The 16th of March 2023. My birthday. He opened his eyes. I know. You sent me flowers. Yes. You called me from the airport and told me you were flying home from Denver. I remember. You weren't in Denver. Julian looked down. No. You were in Vegas. Yes. With Sophie. Yes. The word was almost inaudible. Mara stared at him. She had imagined this moment so many times. She had imagined screaming, throwing something, walking out. Instead, she felt strangely calm. Because the anger had already happened. Now there was only grief. You knew my birthday mattered. Yes. You knew I was waiting for you. Yes. And you still went. Julian rubbed his hands together. I didn't know how to end things with Sophie. Mara's eyes hardened. You had 5 years. I tried. No. She shook her head. You tried to have both. Julian said nothing. She closed the laptop. I have one question. He looked at her. One. I'll answer. Mara leaned forward. If Sophie had never been caught, would you ever have told me? Julian's lips parted. Nothing came out. Mara waited. He looked toward the window. I don't know. She nodded. That's your answer. I would have told you eventually. When? I don't know. Before the wedding. He didn't answer. After. Silence. After 10 years. Mara. 20. I don't know. She leaned back. That is all I needed. Julian looked at her with tears in his eyes. I was going to stop. When? After the wedding. Mara stared at him. After the wedding. I thought once we were married, everything would change. She let out a slow breath. You thought marriage would cure your dishonesty. No. You thought commitment would make you loyal. I loved you. I know. She looked down at her hands. That is what makes this so painful. Julian's voice broke. I never wanted Sophie more than I wanted you. Mara looked up. But you kept her. Yes. Why? I don't know. You do. He shook his head. I was afraid. Of losing her. Yes. And losing me. Yes. So you chose neither. Julian stared at the table. I thought I could manage it. Mara almost smiled. That's the most honest thing you've ever said. He looked at her. I don't want you to leave. I already left. Nah. His voice cracked. You're sitting here. My body is. He swallowed. Mara, please. She looked around the room. The expensive furniture. The polished silverware. The soft music playing somewhere beyond the door. Everything looked beautiful. That was the problem. Her relationship had looked beautiful too. She had spent years defending it because the outside matched the dream. Now she understood that beauty could be maintained by omission. What did you love about me? Julian asked. Mara was silent for several seconds. That's not fair. I need to know. She looked at him. I loved the man I thought you were. Julian closed his eyes. And who was that? A man who kept his word. His eyes filled. A man who didn't need secrets to feel powerful. She paused. A man who could choose one life and let the others go. Julian wiped his face. I can become that man. I believe you. He looked surprised. You do? Yes. Then why can't we try again? Mara looked at him with unbearable tenderness. Because I don't want to spend another 5 years waiting to see whether you become him. He lowered his head. That sentence ended something neither of them had been able to end themselves. That evening, Mara returned to Claire's apartment. Claire was waiting in the kitchen. Well. Mara removed her coat. He couldn't answer. Claire didn't ask the question. She already knew. Mara placed the laptop on the table. He said he would have told me eventually. When? He didn't know. Claire's eyes softened. Mara sat down. I kept thinking I was fighting to save my marriage. You were. No. She shook her head. I was fighting to save the future I thought we had. Claire sat beside her. What's the difference? Mara looked toward the window. The marriage was already gone. Her voice trembled. The future was never real. For the first time since discovering the affair, Mara cried without trying to stop herself. She cried for the wedding. For the house. For the children they had once discussed. For the vacations they had planned. For the Thanksgiving dinners she had imagined. For the Christmas morning when she had pictured Julian beside her. For every ordinary Tuesday she had believed would belong to them. Claire held her. You don't have to stop loving him tonight. Mara closed her eyes. I know. You just have to stop building your life around him. Mara nodded. Outside, the city glowed beneath the dark sky. Chicago was still there. The restaurants were full. Cars moved through intersections. People walked home carrying groceries. Somewhere, couples were laughing over dinner. Somewhere, someone was planning a wedding. Mara realized that the world had not ended. Only one version of her future had. And perhaps that was the hardest grief of all. Not losing the man. Losing the woman she had become while believing he would keep his promises. That night, Mara opened her phone. Julian had sent one final message. I swear I can make this right. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed. You can't repair a future by promising to protect it after you have already chosen to destroy it. She did not send it. Instead, she deleted the message thread. Then she removed the ring from her finger. This time, she did not put it back on. Mara cancelled the wedding on a Tuesday morning. She did not call Julian first. She called the florist. Then the venue. Then the photographer. Then the caterer. Each conversation was strangely polite. Yes, I understand the cancellation policy. No, there won't be another date. Yes, the decision is final. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. By noon, the wedding no longer existed except in other people's calendars. The venue manager asked if there had been a death in the family. Mara paused. No, she said. There had only been a death in the future. She called Julian's mother last. Evelyn Mercer answered immediately. Mara, darling, I've been trying to reach you. I know. Julian said you needed some time. I did. And we're all worried. Mara closed her eyes. I cancelled the wedding. Silence. What? The wedding is cancelled. Evelyn inhaled sharply. You can't make a decision like that without speaking to the family. I've spoken to Julian. You know how much has already been invested. Yes. The guests. I know. The press. Mara opened her eyes. The press? Evelyn hesitated. Julian's father has been working with several charity boards around the wedding. There was supposed to be coverage. Mara almost smiled. Of course. Even now, the wedding was not only a marriage. It was an event. A statement. A piece of the Mercer family image. I won't be making a statement, Mara said. You need to explain. No. Mara, people will speculate. They already have. You can't disappear. Mara looked around Claire's apartment. A half-packed suitcase sat beside the sofa. A cardboard box contained photographs, books, and the few things she had brought from the townhouse. Yes, she said quietly. I can. She hung up. By Thursday, Julian had convinced himself Mara would return. He told himself anger had stages. He had read about that somewhere. Shock. Denial. Anger. Acceptance. She was angry. That meant she was still emotionally connected. He repeated the logic until it almost sounded like hope. At his office, he ignored 3 meetings. His assistant knocked. Mr. Mercer. What? Your father wants you in the conference room. I can't. He says it's important. Julian looked through the glass wall of his office. Chicago spread beneath him, gray and enormous. Tell him I'm busy. His assistant hesitated. He also said Mara cancelled the wedding. Julian looked up. She did. I'm sorry. Thank you. The assistant left. Julian sat alone. His phone was silent. That bothered him more than the calls had. He opened their message history. The last message from Mara was 3 days old. Please don't contact me for a while. He had respected it for exactly 9 hours. Then he had sent 12 more messages. None had been answered. He called her. Straight to voicemail. Mara, it's me. He paused. I know you're angry. Nothing. I know I deserve it. He stopped. The sentence sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. I just want you to come home. He hung up. Then he stared at the screen. Home. The word felt strange. He had sold it. 2 weeks later, Julian went to the townhouse for the final inspection. The house was nearly empty. The new owners would take possession in another month. Mara's photographs were gone. Her books were gone. The blue vase from Charleston was gone. Even the small ceramic bowl she kept beside the front door had disappeared. Julian stood in the kitchen. He remembered Mara dancing there while waiting for pasta water to boil. He remembered her singing badly. He remembered the mornings when she would sit on the counter and drink coffee while he shaved. He had thought those moments were permanent. He had mistaken repetition for permanence. His phone rang. Sophie. He stared at the name. He did not answer. It rang again. He declined it. A text followed. We need to talk. He deleted it. Then he sat on the floor. For the first time in 5 years, he understood what silence actually sounded like. It sounded like a house without Mara. Across the country, Mara sat beside a large window in a small rented apartment in Portland, Oregon. She had chosen the city because Julian had no reason to look there. She had told only Claire. No announcement. No social media post. No farewell dinner. She had changed her phone number. She had forwarded her mail. She had resigned from the volunteer board she had shared with Julian's family. Her old life was disappearing one administrative decision at a time. At first, she felt guilty. Then frightened. Then strangely peaceful. On her 3rd morning in Portland, she walked into a neighborhood coffee shop. The barista smiled. First time? Yes. Welcome. Mara smiled back. Thank you. What can I get you? She looked at the menu. Coffee. Anything else? She thought about it. No. The answer felt larger than it should have. No. For years, Mara had added herself to the end of other people's sentences. She'll want this. She'll understand. She won't mind. She'll come around. She won't leave. Now she was learning how to say no without explaining it. 3 weeks after she left Chicago, Julian received an email from her attorney. He read it twice. Then a third time. It contained no accusation. No demand. No threat. Only a formal agreement regarding the remaining financial matters. Mara wanted her personal property returned. She wanted the wedding expenses divided according to their legal obligations. She wanted no further communication except through counsel. At the bottom was one sentence. Miss Bennet requests that Mr. Mercer respect her decision to establish a separate life. Julian leaned back. Separate life. He read the phrase again. His father entered the office. You heard from her? Yes. And? She wants nothing to do with me. Edward sat across from him. Then respect it. Julian looked at him. Do you know where she is? No. Claire won't tell me. Good. Julian stared at the floor. I thought she'd come back. Edward said nothing. I thought she'd calm down. You underestimated her. I thought she loved me. She did. Julian looked up. Then why did she leave? His father answered quietly. Because loving you became more painful than losing you. Julian's eyes filled. For once, he had no argument. A month passed. Then another. The wedding date arrived. October 24th. Julian woke before sunrise. For several seconds, he did not remember. Then he did. He went to the kitchen. The coffee machine started automatically. He poured 2 cups. He stopped. There was only one person to drink them. He carried his cup to the window. At 8:10, his phone began filling with messages. His mother. His sister. Friends. People who had booked flights months ago. One message came from a friend who did not know what had really happened. Thinking of you today. Hope you're holding up. Julian deleted it. At noon, he drove to the old townhouse. The house was empty now. The new owners had not moved in yet. He stood in the doorway. He could almost hear Mara laughing upstairs. Almost. But memory was cruel. It gave him the sound without giving him the person. He sat on the front steps. For 5 years, Mara had waited for him. Waited for calls. Waited for explanations. Waited through weekends in Las Vegas she believed were business trips. Waited for the version of him he kept promising would eventually arrive. Now he waited. No answer came. His phone remained silent. And somewhere far away, Mara was beginning a life that did not require waiting. That was the consequence Julian had never imagined. He had always feared being abandoned. He had never understood that abandonment could be earned slowly. Not through one terrible decision, but through thousands of smaller ones. A secret. A postponed confession. A hotel reservation. A phone call unanswered. A promise made too easily. A woman told to trust. Until one morning, she stopped waiting. And disappeared. By January, Julian had stopped asking people where Mara was. Not because he had stopped wanting to know. Because he had finally understood that searching for her without permission was simply another form of control. The realization had come slowly. First, he stopped calling Claire. Then he stopped asking Mara's attorney for information beyond what was legally necessary. He stopped driving past places where Mara used to go. He even deleted the location sharing history from his phone. For the first time in his adult life, Julian began accepting that not knowing was sometimes the consequence of having no right to know. Sophie was the first person he confronted. They met in the same quiet restaurant where she had once spoken to Mara. Sophie arrived 10 minutes late and looked at him without warmth. You wanted to talk? Yes. About what? Everything. She sat down. Julian placed a folder on the table. I've ended it. Sophie looked at the folder. There was nothing to end. There was. No. She shook her head. You ended the fantasy. Julian looked at her. What fantasy? That we were waiting for some version of the future where you finally became brave. He lowered his eyes. I was a coward. Yes. The directness of her answer hurt. I lied to Mara. Yes. I lied to you. Yes. I lied to my family. Sophie leaned back. And yourself. Julian nodded. That too. She studied him. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done protecting myself. Sophie was quiet. Then she said, good. Julian pushed the folder toward her. Inside are the financial records from the trips. She frowned. What do you want me to do with them? Nothing. Then why give them to me? Because I want you to have the truth. She almost smiled. Truth is not a gift when it arrives 5 years late. Julian absorbed the words. I know. The next person he confronted was his father. Edward Mercer sat behind the same walnut desk where he had spent decades turning family influence into business power. Julian stood across from him. You knew. Edward didn't pretend otherwise. Yes. You knew I was still seeing Sophie. I knew you hadn't ended it completely. And you said nothing. I told you to end it. You knew I was engaged. Edward looked at him. Yes. You knew Mara believed I was in Las Vegas for business. I knew. Julian's voice tightened. And you let me lie. Edward was silent. Finally, he said, I thought protecting the family from scandal was different from approving of your behavior. It wasn't. I know that now. Julian looked at him. You should have told Mara. Yes. Why didn't you? Edward stared out the window. Because I believed reputation could survive almost anything if the right people stayed quiet. Julian's expression hardened. And now? Now I understand reputation is only another word for what people believe about you before they know the truth. Julian sat down. My marriage is gone. Edward nodded. I know. I destroyed it. Yes. Julian looked at his father. You helped. Edward accepted that without defending himself. Yes. The admission was strangely painful. Not because it changed anything. Because it didn't. Julian began making calls. Not apologies designed to bring Mara back. Apologies without requests attached. He called the wedding planner. I owe you an apology. You don't have to explain. I do. She listened. He told her the wedding had been cancelled because of his dishonesty. He did not mention Sophie by name. He did not blame stress. He did not say the relationship was complicated. He simply said, I lied to my fiancé for years. The planner was quiet. Thank you for telling me. He called several of Mara's friends. Some refused to speak to him. Others listened. One woman said, she loved you more than you deserved. Julian did not argue. Another said, you didn't lose her suddenly. You wore her down. That sentence stayed with him. You wore her down. It explained why Mara had not left after the first lie. Or the second. Or the 20th. She had been slowly exhausted by uncertainty. Every trip. Every explanation. Every time she had swallowed a question because she trusted him. He had not shattered her in one moment. He had eroded her. In March, Julian received an email from Mara's attorney. There was one line that changed everything. Mara has agreed to a brief meeting. Julian read it several times. He did not reply immediately. He was afraid that answering too quickly would make his desperation visible. Then he realized he no longer had anything to hide. Thank you. I will be there. The meeting was arranged in Portland. Julian flew there alone. He stayed in an ordinary hotel. No driver. No assistant. No suite. No attempt to impress. The morning of the meeting, he walked through a neighborhood park and watched people moving through ordinary lives. A father pushed a stroller. 2 women carried coffee. A man jogged with a golden retriever. Nobody knew who Julian Mercer was. Nobody cared. For once, anonymity felt like mercy. Mara arrived at noon. She wore a dark coat and jeans. Her hair was shorter. She looked thinner. But her eyes were different. Quieter. Julian stood. Mara. He. That was all. They sat across from each other. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally Julian said, You look well. I am. He nodded. Good. She studied him. You've changed. I hope so. What does that mean? I've started telling the truth. To everyone. Yes. She looked down. Why? Because I spent years making sure nobody knew what I was doing. And now? Now I don't want to be protected from the consequences. Mara looked at him. That matters. Julian swallowed. I'm sorry. She said nothing. I know those words aren't enough. No. I know I can't undo anything. No. I know I can't ask you to trust me. Mara's eyes softened slightly. You finally understand. Yes. He looked down at his hands. I used to think your leaving was punishment. And now? Now I know it was survival. Mara looked away. That is the first thing you've said that doesn't ask anything from me. I don't want anything. She looked back at him. That's not entirely true. Julian hesitated. I want forgiveness. There it is. He closed his eyes. But I don't need it to be given today. Mara sat quietly. I forgive you. His eyes lifted. She continued before he could speak. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you. I know. It doesn't mean I want you back. I know. It doesn't erase what happened. I know. Julian's voice broke. I know. Mara watched him. For the first time, she believed him. That was almost painful. Do you still love me? He asked. She looked toward the window. Yes. The answer nearly destroyed him. But not enough to return. He nodded. I understand. Do you? Yes. She looked at him. Then why are you crying? Julian wiped his face. Because I finally understand what I lost. Mara's voice was gentle. You didn't lose me in Vegas. He looked at her. You lost me every time you came home from Vegas and let me believe you. Silence. Julian nodded. She was right. There was no single moment to blame. No single person. No single trip. There had been thousands of opportunities to tell the truth. He had chosen silence every time. Mara stood. I should go. Julian rose. Can I ask one thing? She paused. What? Are you happy? Mara thought about it. Yes. The answer was quiet. Certain. Julian smiled through tears. Good. She walked toward the door. Mara. She turned. I hope someday you remember something good about us. She looked at him for several seconds. I do. His expression softened. Then what? The beginning. She smiled sadly. Before you taught me to doubt myself. Then she left. Julian remained alone. He did not follow. He did not call her name. He did not ask her to wait. He simply stood by the window and watched her disappear into the Portland afternoon. For years, regret had sounded to him like fear. Like panic. Like the frantic need to get someone back before it was too late. Now regret sounded different. It sounded like accepting the door would remain closed. It sounded like knowing she still loved him and understanding that love did not give him access to her life. It sounded like finally hearing the silence he had created. And this time, Julian did not try to break it. Spring arrived quietly in Portland. By April, Mara had learned the shape of her new life. She worked from a small office overlooking a tree-lined street. She bought groceries without checking whether Julian preferred one brand over another. She made dinner for one person. She took long walks after work and sometimes sat in the park with a book she barely read, simply because she liked the feeling of having nowhere else to be. There were still mornings when she woke from dreams about Chicago. In those dreams, the townhouse was full of sunlight. Julian was usually there. Sometimes they were laughing. Sometimes he was standing at the kitchen counter, asking whether she wanted coffee. She always woke before the dream could become complicated. For a few seconds, she would lie still and feel the old ache. Then she would remember. And the ache would become something gentler. Not longing. Not anymore. Grief. One Saturday morning, Mara found an envelope beneath her apartment door. There was no return address. She recognized the handwriting. Julienne. She stood there for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I know I promised not to contact you unless you wanted me to. I am breaking that promise once. Not to ask you to forgive me. Not to ask you to come back. I need to know whether there is any part of your heart that believes we could begin again. If the answer is no, I will never contact you again. If the answer is maybe, I will wait. Julienne. Mara read it twice. Then she folded it carefully. She did not answer that day. Or the next. For 3 weeks, the letter remained inside the top drawer of her desk. She tried to ignore it. But eventually, she understood that avoiding the question was another kind of unfinished business. So she called him. He answered so quickly that she knew he had been waiting for the phone to ring. Hello? It's me. Julian said nothing. Mara could hear his breathing. Are you there? Yes. His voice was barely audible. I'm here. I read your letter. I know. You asked whether there was any part of me that believes we could begin again. Yes. Mara sat beside her window. The sky outside was pale blue. There is. Julian inhaled sharply. There is. Yes. Silence. Then maybe. But that isn't the same as saying I want to. He stopped. Mara closed her eyes. I still love the man I thought you were. Julian's voice broke. I can be him. No. You said. I said I love the man I thought you were. She paused. That man existed in my mind. Mara. I loved his promises. His kindness. His certainty. I loved the way I felt when I believed I was safe with him. Julian swallowed. And I wasn't that man. Nah. You're right. Mara looked down at her hands. I spent months wondering whether I should forgive you. And I did. Julian was silent. But forgiveness changed something I didn't expect. What? I stopped needing you to understand what you did to me. He breathed slowly. I understand now. I know. I wish I'd understood sooner. So do we. Another silence. Can I see you? He asked. Mara hesitated. Yes. They met in Portland 3 weeks later. Not at a restaurant. Not somewhere romantic. They met at a public garden on a bright Sunday afternoon. People walked around them with children, dogs, bicycles, and paper cups of coffee. Life was everywhere. Julian arrived first. He wore a simple gray coat. No expensive watch. No polished car waiting at the curb. Mara noticed. She also noticed that she no longer cared. He stood when she approached. Hi. Hi. They walked slowly along the path. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally Julian said, I wanted to ask you in person. Ask me what? If there is any chance. Mara stopped. He turned toward her. I know what you're going to say. Do you? Yes. Then why ask? Because I need to hear it. She looked at him. I can't come back. His eyes closed briefly. I know. I don't want to marry you. I know. I don't want to rebuild the house. I know. I don't want another version of our old life. Julian nodded. I know. Mara studied him. Then what are you hoping for? He looked at her for a long moment. One day when you think of me, I hope you don't feel betrayed. She felt tears gather in her eyes. That isn't something I can promise. I understand. But I don't hate you. Julian looked away. That helps. You shouldn't need it to. I know. They continued walking. After a while, Julian said, Sophie is gone from my life. Mara nodded. I assumed. I ended everything. You needed to. I sold the Chicago office. Mara looked at him. Why? Because I realized I built too much of my identity around impressing people who didn't know me. She said nothing. I've started therapy. She gave him a small smile. Good. I know you don't want to hear about my changes. I don't mind hearing them. He looked surprised. Why? Because I'm no longer responsible for whether they happen. Julian nodded. That makes sense. They reached a bench overlooking the garden. Mara sat. Julian remained standing. I thought losing you would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. She looked at him. And now? Now I think the worst thing was realizing I was the person who caused it. Mara's expression softened. That matters. It doesn't change anything. No. But it matters. Yes. Julian sat beside her. I spent 5 years thinking the affair was one mistake. Mara looked at him. It wasn't. No. He looked down. It was every decision around it. Mara nodded. The first lie. Yes. The second. Yes. The first hotel. Yes. The first time you came home and kissed me knowing where you'd been. His eyes filled. Yes. The first time someone knew and stayed quiet. Yes. The proposal. He closed his eyes. Yes. The wedding. Yes. She looked toward the trees. That was the real betrayal. Julian whispered, I know. No. She looked at him. You know now. He accepted that. Yes. They sat together until the sun began to lower. Eventually, Mara stood. I should go. Julian rose. Will I ever see you again? I don't know. He nodded. That's fair. She smiled faintly. Julian. Yes. I really did love you. He looked at her. I know. And part of me probably always will. His face tightened. But love doesn't mean I owe you my life. I know. And leaving you wasn't revenge. I know. It was the first thing I did for myself. He nodded. I know. Mara walked away. This time, Julian did not watch her with the expectation that she would turn around. He knew better. He stood beneath the trees until she disappeared from sight. Then he sat alone on the bench. His phone remained in his pocket. He could have called someone. His father. His mother. Sophie. A friend. Anyone, but he didn't. He listened instead. Children laughing somewhere behind him. Leaves moving in the wind. A bicycle bell. A dog barking. Ordinary sounds. The world continuing. Julian had once believed karma would be dramatic. He had imagined consequences arriving like thunder. He finally understood that consequences were usually quieter. They were an empty side of a bed. A wedding date that became an ordinary Saturday. A house sold because you believed possessions could replace trust. A phone that stopped ringing. A woman who still loved you but no longer needed you. That was his punishment. Not that Mara hated him. That she didn't. She had forgiven him enough to walk away without bitterness. And that meant he could no longer blame anger for the distance between them. There was only consequence. Years later, people would occasionally ask Julian what happened to his engagement. He never said, "She left me." He said, "I lost her." And if they asked why, he never mentioned only Sophie. He told the truth. "I lied for years. That was all." Because by then he understood something Mara had learned long before him. A relationship does not collapse on the day the betrayal is discovered. It collapses much earlier. It collapses every time the truth is offered a door and someone chooses to lock it. Mara went on with her life. She built friendships that did not require explanations. She traveled alone. She laughed more easily. She eventually fell in love again, slowly, carefully, with a man who did not ask her to ignore her instincts or compete with a hidden past. When that man told her he loved her, Mara believed him. Not because she was naive again. Because this time, love came without secrecy. And Julian lived with the knowledge that he had not lost Mara because another woman had been irresistible. He had lost her because, for 5 years, he had wanted the comfort of being loved without accepting the responsibility of being honest. Sophie had been part of the betrayal. But she had never been its cause. The cause had been Julian's choices. His fear. His vanity. His need to keep every door open. His belief that consequences belonged to some distant future. Until the future arrived. And Mara was gone. Too late, he finally understood that losing her had never been the price of one affair. It had been the accumulated cost of every lie that made the affair possible. And some debts, once paid with a person's trust, could never be refunded.